anybody have any questions or comments or thoughts? Or? Yes, Eric, please.
I see one of your bullet points here is restore freedoms.
Yeah.
Can you speak a little bit about that? What do you think freedoms we've lost recently? What would you do differently?
Well, you know, I think that they are many. Sadly, we shouldn't have to worry about that in our country with the Constitution crafted the way that it is. But right on down the line, I mean, read the Constitution, you can find in almost every amendment, for example, the Bill of Rights, something that we're losing. Our free speech rights in some ways are being infringed. Our freedom to practice religion is clearly being infringed. I think freedom of the press is pretty safe. They operate pretty well. But most of the others, you look at our Second Amendment freedoms to keep and bear arms. I think there's some serious infringements there. So, you know, that's just to name a few. But if you think about, I was on an airplane about a year and a half ago with a young man, mid-20s, from Germany. And he had moved to North Dakota because he married a North Dakota girl and they had a daughter. And he was flying back here after visiting his family there. And we got talking, and when he found out I was a legislator, he said, well, let me ask you something. I said, what's that? He said, you know, you think you're free, don't you? You think America is free? I said, well, absolutely, you know. And he said, well, you know, your country isn't free. I said, what do you mean? He said, look at all the laws you have. Look at all the regulations you have. He said, you're not free. And I was startled. I mean, it almost took my breath away to hear somebody from Germany, young man, but I realized not in his lifetime, but in that country's history, certainly, they'd been under Nazi rule. Part of the country had been a communist country. And here is someone from that place telling us we're not free. So, you know, I think that the freedoms that we've enjoyed historically are being infringed. And I think one of the reasons for that, you know, I get into kind of a political science discussion just briefly on this, but I believe that the reason that's happening is that the branch of government that is constitutionally empowered to make law, the legislative branch, whether it's on the state level or the federal level, and, by the way, the branch that is most responsive to you because you elect the legislative branch to represent you. The powers of the legislature, the powers to regulate, the powers to make law are being infringed from both other branches. We have judges in the judiciary who are making law instead of interpreting, activist judges. So the judiciary is usurping some of the authority of the legislature. And then we have, in the executive, we have things like executive orders, czars, regulations, that's usurping authority from that branch. So people say, well, how would you fix it? Well, I just explained one way through regulation and regulatory reform. But there are a lot of other ways. Congress has constitutional power right now to push back in those areas. They're just not asserting it. So they need to stand on their hind legs and have the guts to do their job. For example, Congress has the power to determine what the courts can rule on. Congress can tell the court system, you will not rule on this issue. It's in the Constitution, but they don't exercise it very often. Congress can also basically deal with judges who are trying to make law rather than interpret it. Because people say, well, you know, judicial appointments are for life. And I said, read your Constitution again. It doesn't say that. What it says is they serve during periods of good behavior. Well, guess what? If a judge is not following the Constitution, if a judge is trying to make law instead of interpreting and applying it, that's not good behavior. And I think it's grounds for impeachment. So if Congress really wanted to, they could assert some authority there. Same thing in the executive branch, and I've already kind of discussed that with regulations to a certain degree. But Congress is not blameless only by sins of omission. They're blameless by sins of commission too. Because, you know, they aren't passing a budget. They keep racking up bills that our kids and grandkids are going to have to pay, and that's just irresponsible. I mean, anybody that's in business, anybody that balances a checkbook at the kitchen table every month understands that. And it's time we take that message to Washington. So I don't know if I've answered your question with a lot of specifics, but I think that, you know, just feel, well, I'll give you two quick examples in one story. Barack Obama recently decided with regard to Obamacare that he was going to force institutions operated by a church denomination to violate their conscience. It doesn't have to be my church, and I don't necessarily care about the issue at hand. The question is the infringement on freedom. And he was forcing them to violate their conscience and do something they don't believe in. That clearly violates religious freedom. And it also violated freedom of speech, rather, because he forbade the military chaplains of that denomination, happened to be Roman Catholics, from telling the troops what the church believed about that particular edict. So, freedom of religion, freedom of speech being trampled just in one fell swoop. He shredded the Constitution with another measure that he did years ago, which I won't go into unless you want me to. But I think, you know, name the day, name the news story, and you can pretty well find the abuse. I think Obamacare is an abomination. And I just saw in the news from yesterday that the Democratic Convention here in North Dakota, their first and proudest resolution was a ringing endorsement of Obamacare and a commitment to fight any attempt to repeal it. We voted in North Dakota not to implement it. We pushed back a year ago. In many ways, we're part of the lawsuit. I called Wayne Stengham, our Attorney General, as soon as it happened. I said, we got to get in this lawsuit, we got to stop it. I spoke to Wayne when he was in the Senate, and of course now that he's Attorney General. And to his credit, he did jump in. We are part of that. We passed some legislation last year to help push back against it. Yet, several in North Dakota, actually of both political parties, I have to say, both Democrats and Republicans, had an entire package cooked up for us in November when we came to town to redistrict. And they said, pass this, healthcare exchanges, et cetera, and it was all implementation of Obamacare.